Welcome to BTEC Sporting Goals, the BTEC Sport and Exercise Science series, supporting educators and learners to maximise the value of their BTEC qualifications during and beyond study. In this episode, episode 7, I will be joined by Simon Hitchcox, Clean Sport Education Officer at UKAD. Today, in this episode, we will be looking at who UKAD are, the purpose and importance of UKAD in the sports sector, partnerships and collaborations between BTEC Sport and UKAD, supporting BTEC learners on their learning and industry journeys, and where to go next to learn more. Okay, so welcome, Simon. Thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Yes, good, thank you. How about yourself?
Yeah, fantastic. No, it's great to put a session on that we can share information with customers, be that lecturers, learners, or those thinking about engaging with BTEC qualifications and seeing how we sort of work together and the importance of what you do at UKAD. So a little bit about yourself, first of all, Simon, just to get started. How did you get into the role that you're in?
Yeah, so I guess first and foremost, I'm Clean Sport Education Officer at UKAD. My specific remit looks at kind of young people's education, so starting from our values-based products that we've got, right the way through down into primary school, and then right the way through colleges, etc., into universities, and we look at our Clean Sport Higher Education partnership that we've got. In terms of my background, kind of a bit of a mix of sport and education. So I worked in sport for a number of years across football and across canoeing, mainly at the British Canoe Union as it was at the time. And also in education, having lectured in colleges and also been a primary school teacher for a number of years as well. So very varied background.
Great, that's a great eclectic mix. I think what might be interesting for some of our listeners in terms of obviously UKAD being UK anti-doping is that you mentioned primary schools there as well. I think a lot of people sort of resonate with performance sport, but your role covers all of those age groups. Why is that important?
I think for UKAD, in terms of, yes, probably people see the headlines in terms of when people are caught, but obviously the main focus of, or one of our main focuses is education. So educating athletes, and like I say, it starts very early on, down in that primary school level, talking about values in terms of linking those to sporting values and kind of wider Olympic values, etc. In terms of playing fair, what it means to play fair, kind of how you'd feel if you were sort of cheated in any way, shape, or form. So if someone starts before the gun goes off in a race, or if someone gets a head start, what that looks like, how you'd feel. And then obviously we move that on to the other ways that people could cheat in sport, whether that be through kind of obviously taking drugs, but also in terms of different aspects, in terms of like mechanical doping, for example, as well.
Great, that's really interesting. That really sort of feeds into the question I was going to ask around what your day-to-day looks like, thinking about BTEC learners or BTEC alumni that think, okay, is there a career route or an avenue in terms of somewhere like UKAD for them? So it must be really interesting sort of engaging with those conversations with those different age groups.
Absolutely. So yeah, so we engage across all ages of in education. So for my job, yeah, obviously speaking to primary school children and university students is two very, very different worlds, and obviously having to tailor what we deliver education wise to suit everyone, and even not just thinking of athletes, thinking of what we call athlete support personnel, the people that work in sport and support our athletes, be that coaches in terms of strength and conditioning, for example, or it could be nutritionists or analysts in sport. Right the way through to kind of more of the kind of logistical and administration roles, because we all play a key support role in building an athlete and really generating what that looks like and implementing that education for those individuals.
And that's great. And I think that's a really useful context for people listening or watching to have that appreciation that this isn't just about those athletes. This is about the personnel that surround that and the impact or the flagging or the citing that can be done to either support or ensure that their sport is clean and protected. Okay, that's a great sort of introduction for people to get a little bit to know about yourself. So I think you've kind of touched on this, but is there anything more you'd like to elaborate on who UKAD are?
Yeah, so UKAD, as we probably haven't covered yet, stands for UK Anti-Doping. So obviously we do focus on delivering really the World Anti-Doping Code and implementing that through a range of sporting national governing bodies and partners. And I say a big part of what we do is prevention in terms of our education programs. But we also have kind of a wide-ranging business, if you like, and happy to expand on those roles that we have within the organisation. But there's a lot of intelligence-led athlete testing that goes on in a number of Olympic, Paralympic, and just professional sport in general. So insight-led that delivers our testing program, and a lot of investigations and results management that goes around that to make sure if any anti-doping rule violations have been broken, then kind of managing that process and providing a fair and robust system to take that case forward, if you like.
I think that's really interesting in the sense that our learners or lecturers delivering some of this content thinking around, actually this isn't just about the people process and those coaching and the personnel or the doing. There's also part of our science portfolio that is involved in the work that you're doing, the high science base in terms of that analysis or data analytics, etc. So a whole range and plethora of skills that are ongoing in the day-to-day of UKAD.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just looking across, obviously I work in the education team, but we work very closely with our communications department in terms of a lot of messaging going out through them. We also work very closely with our science and medicine team in terms of kind of research coming through on new methods, for example, in terms of testing or kind of different processes that have come up then on the prohibited list in terms of things that people can't take or methods that people can't do. We work very closely with our sort of research and innovation team in terms of looking at new ways to educate people or to test people. And then, of course, our testing partners in terms of our colleagues in that department who are the logistics behind our testing program in terms of who's tested, when they're tested, how they're tested. And a lot of that, as I say already, is intelligence based. So we do a lot all over the business, and it combines and we work together very closely with our colleagues. So yeah, there's very interesting depth of knowledge and experience and backgrounds that people in UKAD come from, which makes us as the success that we are.
Fantastic. No, and such a sort of critical role. I think that leads me on to that sort of next prompt there around sort of the purpose and importance in the sports sector of UKAD. People may have seen, you mentioned sort of the marketing and comms around the squeaky clean or protect your sport. But what is the purpose and importance, or does that capture the essence of it?
Yeah, I think the purpose and importance really is that people want clean sport. People want to be able to go to the Commonwealth Games or the Olympics or a football match or a cricket match or any other kind of sport you may go as a spectator or as a competitor and know that the people they're watching are clean, the sport is clean, everyone has that kind of fair play approach in terms of there's nothing going on untoward behind the scenes that's going to have an imbalance in the outcome of the sport or the spectacle. And of course that's where we come in to ensure that integrity. So we know that when athletes are stepping over the line, it's a fair fight. And what you see is all about the outcome of the hard work that those individuals put in over a lifetime in terms of their careers, of all that training, all that hard work, all that effort, is then rewarded by their performance, and that's what they're judged on.
Yeah, and that's critical. And I think anyone that's participated or competed or been an athlete of a certain level, they'd want to look in the mirror and feel that question could be answered around anyone they've competed with or they've competed themselves. I think sometimes something that's often missed by people is that this isn't just something in terms of anti-doping that happens to the elite performers. There's often not that appreciation that if you're in a NGB and you're participating, that also this could be something that happens to you as well.
Yeah, I mean, technically the legislation, the anti-doping code that we follow means that pretty much anyone can be tested at any time. And then obviously those who are competing at the top end of sport are the ones who are going to be kind of more crucial in terms of our testing. But yeah, we monitor people throughout sport and track them as they head through that talent pathway into kind of national and then on to international competitions. But obviously it isn't just that pinnacle of the sport. And I say it's not just the athletes, it's the athlete support personnel who, as well as testing, we're educating as well.
Definitely, and in a moment we're going to get onto some of the resources that we've worked on together or aligned to support that learner journey and the teaching of that content. I think some of the things that stick out for me as well around sort of that BTEC delivery and in terms of the content that you have is it's very much around the safeguarding as well, that there's some real critical information here. If we're thinking about people being tested under a certain age, them conditions being in place to protect them, their well-being and the testers. And also people around not just performance, but their health and mental well-being around some life choices that may impact their ability to be an elite performer in the future through a choice that they've made earlier in their career. And that really resonates with that primary school work that you mentioned.
Yeah, and I think what you said there pretty much hits the nail on the head in terms of the education message is vital. And when we're talking about people having kind of lifelong careers, then making sure that they've kind of got the right information as they go through to really help and support them in that, especially around those kind of areas where moments of vulnerability, should we say, or weakness, changes in kind of a lot of people moving to university in terms of that time in their life where that support network around them of family and friends all of a sudden changes, or and the same can be said in college in terms of you've gone through your secondary school career, you've kind of got specific teachers that are looking out for you, and all of a sudden you are more independent and you're more susceptible to that risk of potentially being manipulated or missing out on something through lack of education, or I guess the risks around specific areas. So we try and support and educate in the first instance, and that's the rationale behind it.
Great, no, really useful point, and something you mentioned there around sort of our college learners that may be undertaking BTECs. We know that the age of maturation is so varied in terms of young people and as they develop, and that will happen across different ages, and just having that information around things that they should and shouldn't be doing or where to look, more importantly, and taking responsibility for what goes into their body around, from protein powder to a supplement to anything that may be even more sinister, that actually they have an understanding of where they should go and what they should look for to inform their decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like I say, that we have a kind of food first approach, and there's the rationale behind that is obviously, although some supplements are batch tested, you can never guarantee what's going to be in what you're purchasing potentially. So it's that risk minimization tool of assessing the risk and the need, and having that real understanding to make an informed choice about that. And you mentioned there about kind of maturity levels, and that kind of links as well with progression in sports. Some sports, by the time you get to college level, you might have already been competing internationally, the likes of gymnastics, for example. Whereas other sports, rowing, rugby, you might be a lot older before you kind of hit that point where you're likely to turn professional, be competing at a higher level. So it's understanding that and delivering the right content to the right individuals at the right time around that level of maturity, progression in terms of talent, but also their, I guess, development as an individual.
Definitely, and I think thinking about why it's been so important for us on our BTEC Sports portfolio to look to embed real purposeful content and the right content from yourself and ensure that that does everything that it needs to do, is these learners most of them are either actively participating in sport, competing in sport, or around that support personnel sort of network. So they're going to be influencing, and the point you make there around batch testing and what that means for a lot of learners, they may not be familiar with that, or people participating and involved in those and if they're not, they can't, as you say, make those informed decisions and ensure that they protect themselves from something that can impact their future career in sport. So I think first of all, the work, if colleagues are not sort of familiar, is that on our 2019 portfolio, our level 3, that much of that content, as much as that we could do that covers UKAD areas, we then share that with yourselves and ensure that that covers those elements that it needs to cover in terms of the specification, and that so centres know that they're getting the right information, the right terminology for when they're covering that within the specification. So some specifications, depending on what units you cover, learners cover, or if they're doing their sporting performance and excellence, they will cover even more of the content. But if you are covering that area, yourselves have looked at it, which for me is critical.
Yeah, and I think again, in terms of the resources, in terms of how they've been created, they've been created to kind of resonate with a number of courses in terms of the BTEC level 3s, and the resources have been set up so they can be tweaked and changed and differentiated for learners on different courses, but also to maximise the most of the learners that are on your course, knowing that the lecturers out there will know their students better than we can design a one-size-fits-all approach. So there is kind of a range of topics, a range of units that are covered, but also there's a range of resources and different activities that you can kind of take off the shelf and tweak to suit your learners, and differentiate that in terms of how it's delivered or how it's assessed. And we think that's really important in terms of getting that message across to as many people as possible.
Brilliant. And what you're referring to there is, Simon, obviously the previous work was just around mapping that specification and content, but this new collaborative resource around these 14 resources, because there's lots of complexities in what happens around UKAD. You've already mentioned all the different sort of areas, but once we start getting into the content and really trying to understand that there's a lot going on, and actually who best for it to come from than yourselves, and for us to be able to share with our customers, lecturers, teachers, to learners, these resources that you've designed to support the teaching and learning of that map content, I think is fantastic. And knowing that to teach and deliver this, actually you could take it off the shelf and use it the way that which it's been designed. We know that many deliverers like to kind of tweak and use it in different ways, but for me, gives a fantastic starting point, or almost a finishing point as well. It's all there for practitioners to go, right, I'm covering this, which of the 14 resources can I use? And I think what's really nice about them as well is we're not just talking about sort of a set of PowerPoints, that there's tasks built into them. And for me, that really sort of feeds into that doing, that understanding, the knowledge, the skills and behaviors, which speaks to the BTEC portfolio and what our learners and centres expect, but also what UKAD need learners to be able to do when they're informing the sector, to be actually, get hands-on and understand and have these conversations. So the activities that you've created, I think, are really purposeful and meaningful and enable that.
Yeah, and again, to I guess to supplement that, the knowledge and expertise that's on there that will really support the lecturers and teachers delivering it as well. There's that kind of background about the research and about the tasks, why they're there, the rationale behind them. And there's also, and it's something we'll go on to shortly, I'm sure, but in terms of where the resources sit on the UKAD Clean Sport Hub, there's also additional activities there that can be taken completely free of charge by lecturers or by students as well, in terms of our introductory sport courses or coach clean modules that will give you even more detail, going even more kind of background and what's necessarily delivered, but would further support that and enhance that knowledge of anti-doping and clean sport in general.
Definitely, and I think that's something that we will for sure touch upon as we move further into this episode. I think what would be really useful is just to give a sense to customers around what this resource provides. So obviously those that are watching will be able to see the breakdown of the resource guide, but those that are listening, the links are on the collaboration page with the BTEC Sport and physical activity website, but also, as you said, Simon, on your education page as well. They'll be able to get into that, and we'll explain in a moment of how they would register and where they would go. But I think what would be useful first of all is just to explain the sort of breakdown of the resource for those that might just kind of pick up the resource guide. We've got a set of tables, as Simon has alluded to before, which covers each of those BTEC Level 3 2019 qualifications. And it very specifically states in terms of the unit and the content of which resource can support the teaching and learning of that element. And as I said, there's activities. So is there anything around that you feel would be value elaborating on at this moment, Simon?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, for those of you who are able to see the screens, you'll be able to see there's 14 specific areas down the side. For those that are joining via audio, those are kind of 14 sections broken down and support our clean sport curriculum that we have at UKAD. And it's also kind of matches with what's delivered from an athlete and an athlete support personnel perspective across the different areas of our education delivery. So, for example, we touched on it earlier, that kind of prohibited list, the list of items or methods that an athlete or an athlete support personnel cannot do. They're prohibited, they're not allowed to do. And having that explained in the process around kind of what that looks like when that's updated, how that list is created, what and why specific medications or methods would give an athlete an example, a boost, if you like, and why that would kind of benefit them. That's in there. And but obviously then looking the other way in terms of what that looks like from the other side, how can we test our medication? How do we know that medication doesn't include things that are on that list? So the process around testing that in terms of utilizing an app called Global Dro, so we can test the ingredients of medicine. So yeah, if you are feeling unwell, if you are injured, yeah, what can you take? What shouldn't you take? Can you take it when you're competing? Can you take it before competing, or is it banned completely? And just having that knowledge, that oversight through the modules and the tasks, the activities in there, obviously enhances that learner's knowledge. And there's bits in there that you probably think that makes common sense. Why would you be able to do that? Why wouldn't you be able to do that? But it's the rationale, the logic behind it. And then obviously we go into more detail about specific elements. So kind of what those anti-doping rule violations are, how can you break the rules? What does that mean for you? What would the outcome be? And then that's probably a lot of the stuff that people see on the news and pick that up online in terms of this individual's been banned for taking this specific element or ingredient or medication or doing this specific process. But kind of how did we get to that point? How have they got a 6-month ban, a 2-year ban, and how will they find out? So it kind of goes through the logical steps around that as well to give you that understanding.
Yeah, it's a really nice resource and really valuable in terms of that delivering it. And I think as it says there, but for those listening, there's the topic overview. There's the supportive links, online links to kind of link out and get information. There's some image-based resources, topic-related activities, and also differentiated assessment tasks. So if you did want to do some formative assessment to check where your learners are with this, or if this is something that you're organically doing, you can use that, but you can use it in its totality, or you can take elements from it. But I think what's important for me, thinking around sort of teaching and learning and how often time poor lecturers are, that this covers the basis. So when we're talking about the list, okay, we know there's a list, we know where to find it. But for learners advising someone and they've downloaded something, they need to know that when that's updated in the year, when is the time when that list is no longer current? Where should you go to look at the live list? And actually, you should be looking at the live list. So this ensures that those bases are covered and gives those real key takeaways for learners to not just inform their learning in terms of sport and physical activity, but also to inform their practice moving forward. And it's not about learners all knowing, but it's about them knowing where they should go or signpost and being able to take that responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, there's certain elements of well, with any sector, but especially within this sector, where things do change. There are technological advances where we can find out kind of more science-based in terms of what people are taking and the effects of it, and then obviously catch people out from what they've done, not just now, but retrospectively. And as that technology changes, or as things are updated, then the resources are made to reflect that, to signpost people to the most updated kind of list of information, or looking through those, I guess, sanctions around athletes, kind of looking at the ones that are most recent, what's coming up, who they can kind of go to and know that the information they get is correct, rather than from it's a kind of secondhand source and being quoted incorrectly. So I think it's that sort of validity of information that's on here and links through as well that's really important.
Great. And I think in terms of the resource, obviously we've heard about your background, Simon, and your lived experience of what you're doing with this content. So, you know, much of that has been formed around that and supplemented by that. Then we've also got the mapping that has taken place to really inform people sort of when they're looking at their scheme of work and think, well, I'm covering that area. Okay, what resource can I use? So that's all there to, as you say, complementary to support centres, the deliverers, to therefore impact that learning experience for those learners in the classroom. So I think for me, if I was in centre, this is something definitely I want to use. Where else would I go for anti-doping information than UKAD? And then also if I'm doing the BTEC and we've got the map in there, we can use that. So where do people go and get it? What do they need to do?
Yeah, so I guess first and foremost, and something we haven't said yet, is completely free. So there's no cost to any of these resources at all. We've tried to make them as easily as accessible as possible. So they're hosted on the UKAD Clean Sport Hub, which can be accessed from the links on both the Pearson website and on UKAD's education pages. And it's literally a quick and easy registration process. As you'd expect, name, address, in terms of email address, date of birth, etc. And then we kind of delve into a bit more detail. So this is kind of the important bit, the sports involvement. So what your involvement is in sport. So are you just lecturing and then delivering content for your college or institution? Are you kind of dual role, and do you have coaching roles, or do you work in sport for other athlete support personnel roles, or are you an athlete or indeed a student? So when you're registering, it's important to give as much information as possible, because then that tailors your sort of clean sport experience to suit. But the important thing, obviously, in terms of getting access to the BTEC resources is, in terms of your role, obviously it's specific for those who are teaching in secondary education or teaching in further education. So there might be an overlap with some of the content there. So as long as you select either of those two roles, then automatically that information will be kind of assigned to you and the resources will be assigned. And so once you've logged on, once you've completed your education process, you'll be able to look into the My Learning section on the left-hand side of the hub, and then that will open up the BTEC resources that we've got. So first and foremost, it's ensuring that you read through the resource guidance, because that gives you the information in terms of the tracking, how it links to the various BTEC courses and its various units. It explains a little bit about kind of how the resources have been pulled together. At UKAD, we're very, very good at using lots of acronyms, which if you're involved in sport and involved especially in anti-doping, then they kind of make logical sense, but lots of them are on that resource guidance as well, because it is something that we see a lot. And we've tried to take that out of the BTEC resources. Obviously, if we're signposting people to other areas of our website or other content, that kind of key link is in there as well. Once you've sort of downloaded and looked through that kind of resource guide, if you like, then each of the modules, each of the units, 1 to 14, are then able to download those straight away, and they'll open in a PDF format. As you say, they have content around the unit itself, and they have kind of background information, and then they have the different tasks and associated resources for those tasks. So even if you've got a sort of true and false question within there for assessment for learning, then you've got the resources to print out true or false flashcards, or there's specific activities around further investigations or research, then they're on those resources as well. So it's a case then of downloading the matrices for those units that you need, and then having a look at that and tailoring it to suit and differentiate it for your learners that you've got in front of you, and almost away you go. And again, this is, say, in terms of further research, further content, if you like, on the Clean Sport Hub, then we do have our introduction to clean sport, which is really good at giving kind of a further overview about what that content is. So I'd certainly advise those kind of lecturers and teachers out there, if you are interested in further details, and that would be a really good port of call for you. And then we've got the sort of coach clean modules as well. And in the coming months, we'll have some further athlete modules, which again, you're more than welcome to utilize. You can access those online through the Clean Sport Hub free of charge, and signpost your learners or colleagues to that information as well.
Yeah, I think firstly on the resource that aligns to the BTEC, that resource guide's really important, particularly around the abbreviations or acronyms, as you say. If you're familiar with the content, they make total sense. In all sectors and all industries we have them, but I think that's really helpful, and it aligns people where they're going to go. But I think that the resources very sort of pragmatic, contextualized, and they're varied as well. I think often, we can have certain resources and things and they're very samey, and we want to sort of move away from tedium, and there's a nice variation there. So I would really encourage people to sign up, take a look and think, okay, where can I use this in my teaching and learning? And you might use some of it, or you might use all of it. Then coming on to Simon's sort of latter point, as this sort of slide indicates, as he mentioned, for those that can't see the slide, the introduction to clean sport and coach clean. For me, this is something in terms of my CPD that I ensure that I do to keep it updated. We know that lots of things change and update, and just being able to point athletes in the right direction, and also being aware of the content and how things are changing, ever changing in terms of technology and how people go around things. So I would totally recommend, if this is a unit that you're looking after or you're responsible for, or you're involved in the sector specifically around that support personnel, that these are modules you should take up. They're not something you can rush through. They're very detailed, all for the right reasons, but they really do give you that information you need to be able to support those in that personnel network.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gareth.
Perfect. I think really the purpose of today, Simon, was to share that information with sort of customer centres to be able to impact both their own learning, CPD, but also their learners' learning journey as well, to impact both on program, but also once they're out there, or whilst they're on program and doing coaching or instructing or leading, however it may be, that this knowledge is purposeful, it's important, and it's critical for people to ensure that they can access their fullest opportunities and experiences moving forward, by making informed choices and taking responsibility. So obviously you've got your website, there's an email address there for those people that can see on screen, but I will link it to those that are picking this up on audio. And you also have a newsletter sign up as well, I believe, Simon.
So yeah, most of our resources are available on the UKAD website. We've got specific education pages on there. Bear in mind that's also a lot of what we do, and they're specific for schools, for colleges, and for sort of universities as well, but also kind of our wider, I guess, sports offerings, if you like. Various different programs on there, which probably give you a bit more context about kind of who we are, what we do. But yeah, very happy for people to contact us in terms of through our education email, so education@ukad.org.uk, and we can pick up any queries there that you've got around this resource or any of our other education offer.
Perfect. Just like to thank you again, Simon, for sort of joining us and sharing and walking through that. Really interested to hear feedback from centres as they start using this with their learners. We hope that it can really sort of add value to your learners' experience and that teaching and learning journey. And again, please just delve in, have a look, and inform your teaching and learning with that. So again, thanks for your time today, Simon, and speak soon.